no more peace and love between you two.
If you had ever passed through Obele Street that year, you will surely know Brenda and Caleb, not because they were the richest or loudest couple in the area, but because their love was like early morning sunshine. They had been married for 8 months. Yet, the way they lived, you would think they had been together for 20 years. They went almost everywhere together, to the markets, to church, to weddings, even to the small kiosks near their gates. If you saw Brenda buying tomatoes, you will see Caleb beside her, helping her pick the best ones. If you saw Caleb fixing the car, you will see Brenda handing him the tools. And when people tease them saying, "Una no dey tire for una sef," they would just laugh and hold hands like two children who didn't care what the world thought. But what made people talk the most was the way they wore and co. It didn't matter if it was Sunday service, market day, or just a short evening walk. Brenda and Caleb's clothes always matched. If Brenda wore a yellow gown, Caleb would wear a yellow shirt. If she wore white lace, Caleb would appear in white too. Even the Ankara was not spared, and everyone in the compound noticed. When they first moved into the compound, everyone liked them. Brenda's smile could light up the darkest day, and Caleb had a calm and gentle way of speaking that made people respect him. They greeted everyone, shared the food during Christmas, and even helped sweep the compound whenever it was their turn. To the young couples around, they were an example. To the older ones, they were a reminder that true love still existed. And to the single women, especially Madame Onome, their 40-year-old neighbor, they were a mirror that reflected everything she secretly wanted but didn't have. Onome lived in the flats opposite theirs. She was a fine woman with good skin and neat wigs. She ran a small business by the junction and often told people that her boyfriend Anthony would soon marry her. But every time she saw Brenda and Caleb walking hand in hand, something twisted inside her chest. She would stand by the window and watch as they laughed like children. Sometimes she smiled too, but it wasn't from joy. It was from pain she didn't know how to explain. Brenda often greeted her warmly. "Good morning, ma," she would say with a bright smile. Onome would wave back, pretending to be busy with her phone. There was nothing Brenda did to offend her, nothing at all. Her only crime was that her husband loved her too much, and that love looked too perfect for someone who had waited 40 years and still had no ring on her finger. Sometimes, Onome told herself she didn't care. It's just early marriage excitement, she would say. Give them 1 year, they will calm down. But instead of calming down, Brenda and Caleb grew even closer. They prayed together every morning, went to midweek church service together, and on weekends they cooked together, laughing and gisting. There was one Sunday morning when Brenda fell ill. She told Caleb to go to church without her, but he refused. "How can I go and leave my other half at home?" he asked. "Church can wait. You are my ministry today." He made her pepper soup, rubbed her back, and stayed by her side until she smiled again. That night, when they sat in front of their house, Caleb was pampering her, and Auntie Onome watched from her window. The sight alone was like a mockery to her. She dropped her phone, stood up, and hissed, "Is it only them? Every day it is love, love, love. Are they the only ones that are married in this compound safe?" She turned off her lights and sat in the dark angry. She remembered her age and how Anthony once said, "Soon, my love, I will go see your people for introduction." She remembered the way he kissed her hand and promised he would bring prosperity. She remembered also the long words he used about the future. She tried to hold on to those words like threads, but the threads looked so thin beside Brenda and Caleb's bright living, and this had become a song for the past 10 years. Instead of feeling hope, Onome felt more angry. She began thinking, why them and not me? Why should their joy be handed out so easily while I wait? She told herself she was unfair. She told herself she should be happy for them, but her mind would not stop. It found new reasons to be angry. If Brenda smiled too widely at someone, Onome thought Brenda was showing off. If Caleb helped a neighbor, she thought Caleb wanted to look good. The next day, she created time to meet and share stories with Brenda just to help herself come out from the hate and envy that were building up. But each visit made the hollow inside her louder. She began to listen for thoughts like a hunter listens for footsteps. She wanted to find something wrong. Just anything that would prove that Brenda and Caleb were not perfect, as finding a fault would be like a medicine that could heal her pride. But she found none, and at the same time, her life started to wobble in small ways. Anthony grew busier with his work. He began to come less often. Sometimes he would get home late and sleep without checking up on her. Sometimes he called and said he had to travel for work. Onome would boil and boil in anger, and her hollow grew louder and colder. When Anthony came, Onome watched his face for signs of love. If he frowned at the wrong time, she took it as a proof that he loved her less. If he spent money on his business, she thought he cared more for work than her. She just wanted him to behave exactly like Caleb. This whole madness led her into smoking and constantly thinking about the life she had planned. She had tried patience, prayer, and talking with friends. None of it seemed to close the hole she felt. The hole kept on asking, why them and why not me? Soon, the seed of envy that had once been small and silent grew stronger. She told herself many things to make watching them easier. They are just showing off, she will mutter. They want people to think marriage is a bed of roses. Let's wait and see how long this one will last. But deep down, she knew it wasn't about them showing off. It was about her not being where they were. Each smile they shared reminded her of what her life could have been if only Anthony had kept his promises. When she asked about the introduction he once promised, he simply said, "We will talk about that later." So instead of facing her heartbreak, she focused her anger on Brenda and Caleb, and she began to notice every small thing that they did. One afternoon, she sat with two women from the compound gossiping. I beg, that Brenda and her husband, they too do," she said, pretending to sound casual. "Even twins know they wear clothes like them every day. Now who they want impress?" The women laughed. "Na true you talk, oh," one of them said. "They go so tire." Onome smiled and felt a strange satisfaction rise in her chest. It was small, but it made her feel lighter, as if each word spoken against Brenda and Caleb made her pain a little easier to bear. That weekend, Anthony finally came to visit. She had cooked his favorite soup and got dressed in a good gown that highlighted the right spots. But when he came, he looked distracted. He ate slightly and barely spoke. "Anthony, you have changed," she said. He sighed. "You think so?" "I don't think so," she replied, folding her arms. "I know." He looked at her long and hard. "Onome, can you stop comparing everything to other people? You keep talking about Brenda and her husband as if their life is your measure. I am tired." Her heart stopped for a moment. "So now, Oga, what are you saying?" she asked with her voice rising. "I am not saying anything though," he replied quietly. "I am just saying that you are changing and it is not in a good way." She swallowed hard, trying not to cry. He didn't even stay long thereafter, and the pain in her chest turned sharp. Her jealousy no longer felt like sadness, it felt like anger, hurt and restless. That night, as she sat alone, she thought again about Brenda and Caleb. In her mind, she could see them laughing. She imagined Brenda laying on her bed on Caleb's shoulder while he whispered something sweet. She could almost hear the laughter through the wall. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but even her tears were bitter. She began to whisper to herself, "They won't last. No love stays that perfect. Something must scatter them. One day they must quarrel and they will surely fight. The words came out like a wish, and the more she said them, the more her mind believed them. By the next morning, she had made up her mind to act. She now desperately wanted them to fall apart. She wanted their smiles to fade and their laughter to end. But how? She remembered a story she once heard as a child about a native doctor who could separate lovers by tying their spirits in opposite directions. It was said that he could turn sweethearts into enemies, peace into quarrel, and love into war. For a long moment, she sat still, staring at the wall. Her heart beat fast and her hands trembled slightly. The thought frightened her, but it also gave her a strange kind of relief. Maybe this would be the way to end my pain, and maybe this would be another way to bring them down to my level so that I can finally feel normal again, she thought. She tried to push the thought away, but it stayed. All through that day in her shop, while she attended to customers, the voice whispered inside her, "Go and see him. Go to the Dibia now." By evening, she could no longer resist it. She closed her shop earlier than usual. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She just packed her handbag and began her journey to a small village at the edge of the town, the place where people said a man called Dibia Okonta lived. Every step she took, her mind screamed questions like, "Are you really doing this? What if something goes wrong? But these people didn't wrong you in any way." Oh. But her heart was too heavy to listen. The pain inside her chest was louder than her conscience. After about 40 minutes, she reached the edge of the forest. The path was narrow and surrounded by tall bamboo trees that creaked with the wind. "Who goes there?" a rough voice asked from behind the trees. Onome froze. Her voice came out small. "It's me, Madam Onome. I came to see Baba Okonta." The voice didn't respond immediately. Then she heard footsteps. A young man with red beads on his neck stepped out of the shadows. His eyes looked dull, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Baba don't see people this late, oh," he said flatly. "Please," Onome begged. "I came from the town and I really need Baba's help." The young man studied her for a while and then he said, "Wait here." He disappeared behind the trees. Few minutes later he returned and said, "Baba say make you come." She followed him through a path that led to a small open hut built with palm fronds and old wood. Inside, a thick smoke of burning herbs filled the air. Behind the low table sat Dibia Okonta, a short dark man with tribal marks. His eyes were sharp but calm, like someone who could see through your soul. He didn't speak at first. He only looked at Onome from head to toe, and then he asked in a voice that carried both power and weariness, "Why are you here, woman?" Onome swallowed hard. "Baba, there is this man and his wife. They are too close. They make everyone else feel small. I want them to..." She paused, unable to finish the sentence. "To what?" the Dibia asked, his voice deep. "To fall apart," she whispered. The Dibia leaned back and exhaled slowly. "You want to break what the heavens tied?" Onome looked down. I just want them to face what life didn't give to some of us. They are too proud and too happy, and I have waited too long for my own joy." The Dibia chuckled. A low, dry laugh that sounded like gravel. "Woman, when two hearts are tied by heaven, whoever tries to untie them pays a price. Are you ready to pay it?" "I will pay," she said quickly, her eyes burning with jealousy. The Dibia nodded slowly. "Then, bring me 2 doors and I will do exactly what you want me to do." Onome nodded eagerly. "Okay, Baba, I will bring them." The Dibia closed his eyes and began to hum an old strange tune. The air in the hut felt colder. Onome could feel something unseen move around her like invisible hands brushing past her face. He opened his eyes again. When the process is completed, you will throw them into the river before sunrise. Now you may go. Onome stood up and walked fast, almost running. Her slippers gathered dust, but she didn't stop. She wanted to get out of that forest before her courage will fail her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake replaying the Dibia's words in her mind. Whoever tries to untie what heaven tied must pay a price, but her heart was already too dark to care. In the quiet of her room, she whispered to herself, "Let them quarrel, let them fight, and let them know what it feels like to be alone." Then she smiled bitterly, turned off her light and fell asleep, not knowing that she had just opened the door to something she would never be able to close. The next day, she stood in front of Dibia Okonta. She had brought the dolls he asked for. The Dibia took them from her without a word. His face was serious and his eyes were dark and deep. He placed the two dolls before him and studied them for a moment. Then he looked up at Onome and said, "What you are asking for is not a small thing. Are you sure you want it?" Onome swallowed hard. "I am sure. I don't want them to live in peace again. Their love is too much. I want it to scatter." Dibia Okonta nodded slowly. "So be it." He picked up the dolls, reached for a red thread and tied them together back to back, their faces turned away from each other. As he walked, he began to chant, low at first, then louder. He poured a few drops of dry gin over the dolls, spat 3 times on the ground and rubbed white chalk on their heads. Then in a voice that made the floor seem to vibrate, the Dibia said, "From this day, there shall become a cat and rat. What was once sweet between them shall become sour. That which was once laughter shall become thunder. From today, these two who were one, these two who ate together will now turn against each other until the river that receives this offering returns it, which we know can never be possible." When he finished, he placed the dolls carefully inside the small clay pot, covered it with palm leaves and sealed the top with melted wax. He lifted the pot with both hands and blew smoke from a burning leaf over it. Then he turned to Onome and said, "It is done." She stood there quietly, her eyes fixed on the clay pot. "What do I do with it, Baba?" she asked. "Before the cock crows," he replied, "you will take this pot to the river at the edge of the town. You will throw it into the water and walk away without looking back. Do not listen to any sound you hear. Not a cry, not a whisper, and not even your own name. If you look back, the curse will follow you home." Onome nodded quickly, both scared and happy. He handed her the pot. It was warm to the touch and a strange smell of herbs rose from it. "Go now," he said. "The river is waiting." Onome took the pot carefully, wrapped it in a shawl and stepped out of the hut. The next day, as early as 4 a.m., the world was still quiet, but Onome the evildoer was already standing by the river bank. For a brief moment, she stood still. The Dibia's words echoed in her mind. "Do not look back and do not listen to any sound." Her hands shook violently. The pot felt heavier now. She looked up at the sky. There were no stars, only darkness. She whispered, "Let their peace scatter and let their love die." Then she swung the pot with both hands and threw it into the river. It landed with a loud splash and sank quickly, leaving a small circle that spread and disappeared. For a second, she thought she heard a faint sound, something like a sigh or a whisper coming from the water, but she didn't wait. She turned immediately and began to walk back very fast. By the time she reached her compound, she slipped into her room, shut the door quietly, and leaned against it, breathing heavily. Her palms were cold, Her legs were weak, but her heart was strangely calm. She sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "Now we will see." Soon it was 6 a.m. Brenda opened her eyes first. She turned to the other side of the bed and saw Caleb still lying there, facing away from her. Normally, she would reach out and rub his shoulders, whispering, "Good morning, my love." But this time, something stopped her. She just stared at his back with a small frown on her face. Why is he even sleeping like this? She thought to herself. At the same moment, Caleb opened his eyes. He didn't turn to greet her like he always did. Instead, he sat up quietly, stretched and muttered, "See the way you are sitting this early morning like a pregnant woman." He didn't know why he said that. He wasn't even sure where the thoughts came from. But suddenly, everything about Brenda began to annoy him. The way she breathed, the sound of her slippers on the floor, even the way she hummed while brushing her teeth. By the time they sat down for breakfast, the air between them was cold. Brenda had made yam and egg sauce, the same meal Caleb loved. But when she placed it on the table, he didn't smile. She asked, "Won't you pray before eating?" He looked up at her sharply. "Must you remind me of everything? Do I look like a child to you?" Brenda was shocked because Caleb had never raised his voice at her before. "I was only asking," she said quietly. "Next time, keep your asking to yourself," he snapped, picking up his finger spoon. She stared at him speechless. For a moment, she thought maybe he was just in a bad mood, but deep inside, something felt wrong. Not just wrong, but deeply wrong. From that morning, things began to change little by little. Caleb stopped waiting for Brenda after work and he started going out alone, saying he needed fresh air. Brenda, who once loved cooking for both of them, began to lose the joy. She would now prepare her meals separately and keep his in the kitchen, covered but cold. The neighbors started to notice. Mama Grace, one of them, whispered one afternoon, "Wait oh, is it only me? But Brenda and Caleb don't wear matching clothes anymore." Another added, "It's true. I noticed it as well. Even in church last Sunday, Brenda wore blue while Caleb wore brown. Something is definitely wrong in their paradise. Maybe the honeymoon is over." Each day, they quarreled about small things. If Caleb dropped his shoes by the door, Brenda complained. They no longer prayed together. They no longer ate together. And when they went to church, they sat apart. Even the pastor noticed. One Sunday after service, he called them gently. "Brother Caleb and Sister Brenda, I hope all is well at home." They both forced smiles, and Caleb quickly said, "Yes, sir. All is well with us, sir." But at home, Brenda tried to talk things out. "Caleb, what is happening to us? Why are we always fighting?" He shrugged. "Maybe you should ask yourself. You are the one who is always speaking at me." "I am not picking at you," she said with tears filling her eyes. "I just want us to be happy again." "Then stop talking about it," he shouted and walked out of the room. One evening, it rained heavily. They were both inside the house, but it felt like two strangers hiding from the storm. Brenda sat near the window watching the rain hit the glass. Caleb was on the couch scrolling through his phone. She whispered, "Do you remember our first rain together?" He didn't answer. She turned her face away. Her eyes were wet. The same man who once told her, "You are my peace," now looked at her like a burden. Things grew from bad to worse. They began to sleep in separate rooms. Sometimes they would go 2 days without talking, and when they finally talked, it always ended in arguments. The once lovely home now echoed with cold silence and angry footsteps. Madame Onome, who caused it all, noticed it and was so happy. From her window, she watched as they walked past each other without speaking. She saw the way Caleb left the house alone every morning and how Brenda followed afterwards with a sad countenance. And each time she saw them like that, a wicked smile crept across her face. "Shebi I said it," she will mutter. "This is just the beginning, no." By the third week, the quiet war inside Brenda and Caleb's home had become a full storm. What started as small arguments now became loud quarrels that even the neighbors could hear through the walls. It was no longer the home people once admired. The same apartments that used to echo with laughter now carried voices filled with anger and pain. Sometimes, when Brenda spoke, Caleb shouted over her. Other times, Caleb tried to stay silent, but Brenda's tears made silence impossible. The bond that once felt unbreakable was now hanging by a thread. One evening, Caleb came home late from work. He looked tired and his face was so hard. Brenda, who had cooked his favorite okra soup, asked gently, "Should I warm your food?" He dropped his bag without answering. She tried again. "Caleb, talk to me. How was work today?" He turned to her sharply. "Brenda, must you talk every minute? Can't a man just have peace when he gets home?" The words hit her like a slap. She stared at him in disbelief. "I was only asking if you wanted to eat." "Then stop asking. I will eat when I want," he barked, walking into the bedroom. Brenda stood still. She didn't understand what was happening to them. That night, they didn't speak, and by morning, they didn't as well. Days passed, and the distance between them grew like a wall. Caleb now left the house without breakfast. In church, where they once sat side by side, they now sat far apart. Caleb stayed at the men's corner. Brenda stayed at the women's corner. At first, people thought it was just normal husband and wife mood swings, but as weeks went by, the change became too clear to ignore. One Sunday during service, the choir sang a love team worship song about unity in marriage. Couples around them held hands. Brenda glanced at Caleb, hoping he would look at her too, just like before, but he didn't. He stared straight ahead, expressionless. Tears filled Brenda's eyes, and that was the moment everyone concluded that something was definitely wrong. After church, two ushers whispered at the back, "Now wow, Caleb and Brenda no even talk to each other again." "I saw it too," the other replied. "They used to look like people in honeymoon. Now see them." From that day, the gossip began to spread quietly through the congregation. Some said Brenda had become proud since marriage. Some even said Caleb had found another woman, and others said it was just the devil attacking a good home. Meanwhile, Madame Onome was enjoying every bit of the drama. Every evening, she sat by her window pretending to be busy with her phone, but her eyes were always fixed on the door. When Caleb shouted, she smiled. When Brenda cried, she would laugh, feeling so satisfied. A few days later, Brenda sat outside the house lost in thoughts. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Onome saw her and walked over, pretending to be concerned. "My dear Brenda," she said, pulling a plastic chair beside her. "Are you okay? I noticed you have not been yourself since these days." Brenda tried to smile. "I am fine, ma, just tired." "Tired?" Onome asked gently. "You know you can tell me anything, right? You have been too quiet. So tell me, is Caleb giving you trouble?" Brenda's eyes dropped. She hesitated. Onome leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Don't keep it inside. Men can be funny sometimes. You will just be loving them with all your heart, and they will start acting like you are the problem." Brenda sighed, and before she knew it, her mouth betrayed her. "Ah, ma, he has changed. Caleb is not the same anymore. He shouts, ignores me, and sometimes he doesn't even look at me." Onome placed a hand on her shoulder. "My dear, don't let him make you weak. Oh. If he wants to change, you too change. Don't beg him and don't ever cry, because men, they only respect strong women." Brenda looked at her uncertain. But I don't want to fight him, ma. I just want peace. Onome smiled. Peace is good, but sometimes you have to teach a man a very bitter lesson. Don't let him think you can't survive without him. Don't even try that at all. Brenda nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Onome stayed a few more minutes, pretending to comfort her, then stood up and left. As she walked back to her apartment, she grinned. Good. The more she listens, the worse it will get, she whispered to herself. That night, Brenda followed Onome's advice. When Caleb came home late, she didn't greet him. And when he asked why she didn't serve dinner, she said coldly, "You can warm it to yourself." Caleb stared at her in shock. "What did you just say?" "I said, warm it yourself, sir. You are not a child." His eyes widened in anger. "So, that's how to talk to your husband now, right?" "Yes," she replied. "Since you no longer talk to me like your wife, why should I treat you like my husband?" The arguments grew louder and louder until even the neighbors could hear them. "God, what's happening to us?" Brenda cried at one point, her voice breaking. But Caleb didn't answer. He stormed out of the house and slammed the door behind him. Onome, lying in her room, was smiling, feeling so satisfied, like someone who had gained the whole world. The next morning, Brenda moved about the kitchen with a blank face, banging the pots louder than usual. Caleb, who was in the sitting room, ignored the noise. Before, this same sound used to make him smile, but now it only made him feel more irritated. When she placed his food on the table, he didn't even look up. "I won't eat though," he said flatly. "But why?" she asked. "I said I am not hungry," he replied. "Then don't complain if I don't cook, because you are beginning to make it feel like nothing I do is ever right." Caleb ignored her and walked away. Immediately, Auntie Onome came knocking. "My dear, are you home?" Brenda quickly opened the door. "Good morning, ma." Onome entered with her usual warm smile, carrying a small tray of fruits. "I bought excess yesterday, so I said let me share with you." Brenda smiled faintly. "Thank you, ma." They sat together in the sitting room and Onome watched Brenda quietly, her eyes sharp but her voice calm. "You don't look happy, my dear," she said after a moment. "Is this still about Caleb?" Brenda sighed and nodded. "Yes, ma. He rejected my food again this morning, and sometimes he ignores me like I don't exist." Onome shook her head slowly. "These men, they are the same everywhere. Oh. Once they see you crying like this and begging, they will use it to control you." Brenda looked at her confused. "What do you mean, ma?" "I mean, don't beg him," Onome said firmly. "Act strong, dress up, smile, and don't ever let him see you broken. When he sees you happy without him, he will start running back." Brenda hesitated. "But he's my husband, ma. If I don't talk to him, who will?" Onome smiled sweetly. "My darling, you will talk to him, but not the way you used to. Stop making him feel too important. Let him wonder why you are suddenly quiet. That's how men value women." Brenda just said confused. "But ma, I just want peace." "Peace will come," Onome said sweetly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But not when you are always the one trying. Men are like children. When you always run to them, they stop running to you. Some men only respect distance. Stop answering him when he talks. Ignore him completely. Let him feel the emptiness of silence." "But what if it gets worse?" Brenda asked again. "It won't," Onome said quickly. "Silence is stronger than shouting, and that's why it is the best answer given to a fool. Make him miss your voice. Trust me, he will come back begging." Brenda nodded slowly again, her heart torn between pain and confusion. When Onome left, she sat alone thinking. But wait, oh, Has this love died a natural death? So I ask you, my dear Karma tribe, what is the answer to this Brenda's question? And what do you also think will happen in the part 2 of the story? Remember that these two had been thrown into a river spiritually. Kindly share your thoughts with me in the comments. Please don't forget to give the story a thumbs up, share out to your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel if you have not done so. Until I bring the next part of the story your way, it is a goodbye from here, and God bless you.